I'd rather take Buck and Aikman over having Stephen A. bugging the booth half the time and letting them concentrate on calling the game of football so I can actually understand what's going on the field and not have Stephen A. going, "It's blasphemous." Welcome to episode 280 of Empty the Bench here on the Empty the Bench podcast network, presented by Playback. He's Anthony Balester. I'm Nick Morgasen. Follow us on social media for Empty the Bench at ETB Sports, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at ETB Sports. Follow the Empty the Bench podcast network at ETB Network, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Make sure you follow our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ETB Network. Closer and closer on the march to 1,000 subscribers. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, which is very important. If you can't watch on the video side, listen to Empty the Bench wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Apple or Spotify or any other audio platform that our podcast goes out via audio. And Empty the Bench is presented by Playback. Make sure you listen later on in the program to find out more. Okay. Obviously, no podcast last week. We had some circumstances last week. Hopefully you're feeling better.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad to be back. And we definitely got a lot to get into. I know we did miss free agency, but we'll be breaking all that down. And there was definitely more news that happened since that last week. So we can't wait to get into that as well.
Yeah. So like Anthony just said, NBA free agency, there was a lot of crazy things that happened. Certain things that, excuse me, that I didn't even expect. We'll talk about Stephen A. again. MLB announces the 2025 All-Star rosters. Certain big name in New York left off the All-Star roster, which a lot of people are upset about. Angel Reese blasts the referees. I feel like Angel Reese is turning into Draymond Green. I have a lot of reasons for that. I'll talk about that later. And Colin Cowherd named to the Radio Hall of Fame. And why is that important? We'll explain that later. So let's get into it. 2025 NBA free agency. There was a lot of craziness that went down. A lot of interesting deals that went down. Miles Turner deal with the Bucks was probably one of the more shocking ones to me. I thought the Pacers were going to put him on lock when his deal came up, but I think the Pacers are in such a rebuild because now we confirmed that Tyrese Halliburton is not playing all of next season. So maybe in Miles Turner's point of view, he's like, well, there's no winning for next season. So before we get into all the rigmarole, did that one shock you like it shocked me?
Yeah, it definitely shocked me because, a lot of people were saying, man, there's no way that the Bucks are going to be able to do anything with where they are, salary cap wise. They also let Brook Lopez walk. They didn't re-sign him. And then ultimately to what allowed them to get Miles Turner was they went out and bought out Damian Lillard's contract. So basically it takes the $100 or so million he will still earn. And instead of them having to pay it over a few years, you spread it over 5 years. But what that means is now you're going to be on the Bucks for around $20 or so million for 5 years, and the guy's not even going to be on your roster. And yeah, Miles Turner is a good player. He was very, very crucial for the Indiana Pacers. But is he really the needle mover that's going to make that much of a difference to where you're going to be paying him and another guy who's not on the roster just so you can get him? I mean, you added the money that Miles Turner's getting and the money that you got to pay Damian Lillard to make it work. You're talking like $49 million just to make this move. Now, probably because there's so much uncertainty with the injuries in the East, with Giannis and Bobby Portis and some of the others, maybe they think that with this roster they can compete. But, you don't have a really great point guard. I know Porter Jr. Has some promise, but he's not a guy that's going to, be able to deliver you a championship. In today's NBA, you got to have an all-star guard to be able to compete. And, yeah, Porter's a good player, but he's not nowhere near an all-star. So, yeah, this may make a Bucks a top 4 team in the East, but ultimately, I see them as probably a second-round exit team again. And if Giannis or anybody gets hurt, you're really stuck. I know they're probably desperately trying to, keep Giannis. Giannis, has been talks about potentially demanding a trade. He hasn't, came out and made that official yet, so we'll have to see. But I guess, Milwaukee was just a desperate team, and we know when teams get desperate, they make mistakes.
I mean, let's go back because I should have mentioned those two up front, both with Milwaukee, like you just mentioned. Dame's contract getting waived, which nobody expected Dame Lillard to get waived. Now, there was already discussions that was Dame going to last the rest of the contract in Milwaukee. My assumption was no. I think eventually he would have demanded out or asked for a trade. I think that, and a lot of people were saying this, that the trade kind of early facilitated the move of him out of Milwaukee. So this probably did the Bucks a favor, partially because they would have had to pay part of it anyway. Now, the Miles Turner move, I don't know if this keeps Giannis in Milwaukee. I heard a lot of reports from a bunch of different people saying that he's not happy right now with what's going on in Milwaukee. And do you blame him? I wouldn't blame him for what's going on in Milwaukee. I think they're just throwing money against the wall and hoping that whatever they do sticks. And we saw this with quite a few teams. We saw it with Milwaukee. I think the Brook Lopez move, I think eventually he was going to walk because I think he wants to go to a team where a veteran presence fits a team that's going to compete. Now, is that the Clippers? I don't know if I agree with that one. I think maybe going to the other side of LA might have made a little more sense, which I think the Lakers really screwed up. And we could talk about them in a few minutes. But they were one team that really is up in flux, I would say right now, the Bucks. They don't know what they're doing and what the ownership is doing. On the other side of things, we got to talk about the Celtics too, because no Tatum, Brown is going to be out at least 5 or 6 months, probably with his injury. Do we have a confirmation on that or no?
I'm not sure exactly how long he's going to be out, but I know they're definitely not going to have Tatum for a while. But I do think, the GM did the best he could. They were able to, trade away Porzingis. They were able to get rid of Drew Holiday. You still got Derek White. I know there was rumors about maybe them bringing in Dame. When he recovers from his injury. They still, they were able to get Anthony Simons in the trade as well. I think he's a guy that can contribute this year. He's a good three-point shooter. I think the Celtics did the best they could with the hand that they were dealt. I think with Brook Lopez also, too, is I don't think he wanted, getting up there in age, I don't think he wanted to be the sole big man that had to play all these minutes. Now he gets to go to LA. He's got Zubac now, who's going to be the starting center. He could kind of be the backup and play a little bit of minutes to be much more fresher and kind of not put so much of a hard workload on a guy who is getting up there in age. And we know big men, we don't want to have them getting big minutes when they get older. So I definitely like that move for him. The Clippers, when Kawhi Leonard is healthy, which is a very, rare thing that we've seen the last couple of years. When he's healthy, the Clippers have been a team that has been able to compete. And now it looked like last year we're finally able to see a fully healthy Clippers team. Maybe now this year we'll be able to see the Clippers team that we've been waiting so many years for to finally come to fruition. So I think it makes sense for that. And for the Bucks, I mean, even with the Dame Lillard trade, they were just trying so desperately everything they could to build around Giannis. And Giannis did get him a championship once. So, they're doing a lot better than most other franchises have. But right now, I just think they're in a standstill. And having Giannis, they're always going to be a team that's going to be really good to make the playoffs, but they're never going to be good enough to really win another championship, but they'll never be bad enough to really get a great draft pick. So they're kind of at this standstill of what they're going to do. So I think, Giannis, has his right to, wonder about his future, and is Milwaukee going to be the best team to get him a championship? And I even heard the Damian Lillard wave and buyout upsetting him more than anything.
Yeah. Now, we don't have 100% confirmation on that rumor. I do believe he's probably upset. At the same time, I don't think Dame and Giannis really clicked together as a duo. So I don't really think that duo was ever going to win a title. So like I said, I think the injury just led to an earlier facilitation of him being moved out. Now, on the Celtics side also, the trade that happened also with what you said, Porzingis and Drew Holiday. I think that saved them like $180 million because they were so far over the second apron. It was like they were at 500 million or whatever, and this saved them 180. And I was like, and those guys are not even worth anything, in my opinion. Maybe Drew Holiday, but Porzingis is. I'm surprised anyone took Porzingis in a trade, considering I think he played 1 or 2 games for the Celtics in the playoffs, the whole playoff stretch, and Drew Holiday was upset that he got traded. Now, he was going to be a casualty one way or the other because they needed to save money, however they were going to save it. But I don't know what to expect from the Celtics this upcoming year. Same thing with the Pacers. Same thing with the Bucks, who had these great teams. I mean, is it scary to think that the Knicks might be at the top of this Eastern Conference? And we'll get to them because they have some issues too. But is that a reality?
I think it's got to be so. I mean, there's so much uncertainty. I think out of the 3 teams you mentioned, I mean, the Pacers are probably in the worst position because they lost Turner and Halliburton due to injury. I think the Celtics with Derek White and if Jaylen Brown's healthy, that's a team with Anthony Simons. That's a team that can compete, especially in the East. But, man, when you look at the East right now, it looks like it's got to be between the Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then would also add in Desmond Bane. I would even throw the Magic in there as a sleeper team.
Yeah, the Magic, everyone's going to be watching the Magic, including they just signed Pablo Banchero to a $239 million rookie max extension, which could be worth up to $287 million with all the incentives, which I don't know if I would have signed him to that contract. It's a little wild. I know he's a great player. He's a star. I think it's early to be throwing that type of money. I don't know if you saw that, like, their starting 5, like the next year or two is going to be making 35 million plus each, which I saw someone drop a tweet that says, oh, this will be good for about 2 years. And then it'll be like every other team. They're going to trade it because they just don't want to pay it anymore.
I would say out of all those guys, though, Ben Carroll definitely deserved it the most. I mean, the guy came in as a top pick. He was an unbelievable prospect coming in as a rookie. Really, really played really well, averaging over 20. And then has pretty much been a top 15 player in the NBA All-Star who has led the Magic to back-to-back playoff wins or back-to-back playoff appearances. So I think he's definitely earned it. He's a guy that can play both ways. You like to see him still develop maybe a three-point shot a little bit better, but he's gotten better each year, and I think he's one of the promising young players. I mean, not too many players have had a better start in their NBA career than him. So he definitely deserves it. But like you said, when you're looking at the total cash that they're paying all these guys like him, like Wagner, like Desmond Bane, like Suggs, you know, in a couple years, it's going to be interesting to see how this ends up.
With all the second apron issues now, you're not going to be able to afford all these deals down the line. You probably have a good, 3 to 4 years at most, maybe, before all those numbers hit the cap at some point. And then I'll give you another deal. Since we're talking large deals, look at Shai's contract extension. 4 years, $285 million. I did the math. $71 million a year. Are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me? We're at a certain point now where we're paying guys $71 million a year to play the game of basketball. I mean, that team probably only has 2 to 3 years to win another title, the way that money is going, because who do they still have to pay that's up for? Williams, right, is another one that's going to be up for a huge deal. He's the secondhand guy to Shai. I mean, if he got 71, what the heck is Williams getting?
Probably somewhere at least in like the 40s or 50.
So maybe they'll get 2 or 3 more years out of that roster then, maybe?
And then you got Chet Holmgren, too, who's going to be probably looking at around 30 or so. I mean, I know Chet Holmgren hasn't made an All-Star, so that would make his contract extension a little bit smaller than those guys. But damn, I mean, they're pretty much going to have all their salary tied to 3 guys, and then you're going to start losing guys like Lou Dort and others who were so crucial to that playoff run.
I mean, like, a guy like Caruso seems valuable now, doesn't he? I mean, like, don't get me wrong, and I'm partially joking, but partially serious at the same time, because the guy is a great veteran presence. I think he's only, and I'm joking when I say this, but only making $10 million a year, because that's considered small in today's game. But he really kept their heads down straight to win this title. But is Chet really worth 30 to 35 million with the injuries? And at one point he was bedridden due to injuries and stuff. Like, he's not worth 30 to 35 million. And with the way the numbers are, would you be surprised if his agent said, I want 40 million a year? No, I wouldn't, but I wouldn't give it to him. Just because we ask for things in life, it doesn't mean we get what we want. So,
and the way the NBA is set up, it seems like you really can only pay 2 guys, and then you kind of just got to recycle the rest of the roster. And OKC's got their 2 guys. As great as Chet Holmgren is and what he can be, I don't think he'll ever be as great as what Jalen Williams is right now. So it seems like they're going to have to build around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams, and then everybody else is just going to have to be cycled out. And if you get any of those players wrong, you got no depth. So, I mean, but that's the future of the NBA, where you're going to have to just build around 2 guys. The days of having a big 3 are over.
I mean, I can't believe I'm going to say this next sentence I'm about to say, but I have to give Draymond Green credit for one thing here. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but he spoke out about the CBA second apron issue and how it's kind of destroying dynasties and stuff. And for one time, this is what I'm going to agree with Draymond Green, that because you put in all these extra restrictions on teams being allowed to spend, instead of now the owners are going to pocket more rather than put it out to spend, why are teams going to want to spend the money like the Golden State Warriors, which you've heard me say many times, that what did the Warriors do that kept them in a dynasty run? They were willing to pay over the cap value to keep the team together. I'll ask you, do you see teams doing this anymore? That's more of a rhetorical question, but you know what I'm asking.
Not really, unless if it it's like a Kevin Durant on the Warriors situation to where you're almost guaranteed the championship. The only way an owner's going to pay all those penalties is if you basically have to be guaranteed a championship. And with the parity and the competitiveness we have, as great as the Oklahoma City Thunders are, there's no team that's going to be guaranteed that championship. And honestly, I kind of like the way that it is now, because I don't think the NBA wants dynasties like they did. They don't want the same teams winning the championship over and over and over. They like the fact that we've had all these multiple championships, like we see in the NFL and like we see in other sports. The NBA has always been a dynasty league where, in one decade, like the 80s, it's the same 2 teams win it, and then the Bulls destroying it in the 90s, and you got the Lakers in the 2000s, the Warriors in the 2010s. I think now we're going to see a parity and allow other teams like the Toronto Raptors, Oklahoma City Thunder, where they can win a ring or 2. And yeah, it's not going to incentivize the teams who win a championship to keep spending their money. But what happens is the teams who aren't good can get some of those players. Like a team like Portland or a team like the Jazz can go out and get a Chet Holmgren or somebody else. Now that allows other teams, other fan bases to get hope, instead of for decades and decades where you got to half the league who are in purgatory, knowing there's no sense of hope for them to be able to compete in the near future.
Right, but does it stop teams that are very close to winning, to wanting to spend that money? That's another question I would ask, because back in the day, when you were able to freely spend a little bit more, you were willing to take a risk on an extra guy or 2. Now, unless it's a perfect situation where you're basically adding on one more big name to help your roster to win, you're not going to do that anymore, unless it's almost like a scientific equation and you're fitting in the symbol that's needed to err on the perfection of that equation. Now, I found the quote. And this is from Draymond. One can only point to the new CBA and the second apron hard cap for absolutely putting an end to free agency as we once knew it. Sadly, I sit here and watch so many players overplay the market and not understand what they're up against with the new rules, which leads me to try to understand the unstaggering percentage of guys that has no idea of the business they are a part of. And as I, a vet in this league, watch players mismanage their careers before they know it, look back like, damn, where to next? I can go so far with this, but I really don't feel like typing it all out right now because there's so many arms to this topic, an insane amount, and then add in my personal experience with it. I mean, he's basically saying that with this new second apron rule, teams are afraid to spend. That's what they're saying, right?
Yeah, but I think most of the time teams that are getting close to the second apron, I mean, for you to get to that close, you have to have a lot of stars. And I think the NBA doesn't want one team, whether they got the chip or not, having too many stars. I think the NBA likes the idea of everybody having one or two stars instead of just 5 or 6 teams having 3 or 4 stars. I can understand the argument on both sides, though.
It's a tough topic because, again, you want more teams to win. You want more parity. That's the big word that's going around in the NBA. More parity, more parity. I mean, before Adam Silver, when we had Stern as the commissioner of the NBA, what was it? It was like 8 teams in 30 years won the title, and now we've had 8 different winners in 8 years. I mean, that's great, but at the same time, how do you give a fan base hope if they're only winning one every 8 years or something in that scenario?
I guess we got to have fans who aren't greedy and are just okay with winning one championship.
No, you're right, and I totally understand that. But I'm saying you want the fan base to be more incentivized to show up, to pay for those tickets, to pay for those parking lot passes, or if you're only going to win one, what makes you want to? And as ticket prices go up, as this is more in the NFL than the NBA, but the seat licenses that they charge ridiculous amounts of money for. If you're not going to win, or you're not going to put together a run like the Celtics did, or like the Miami Heat did, or the Warriors did, and this was before the rule changes, but you're not going to see anything like the Patriots ever again. Because now they're changing the rules in the NFL for the amount of money you can spend as they keep hard capping everybody. So this is my opinion. You might have a different one. I think dynasties are done in sports.
No, I definitely think so. And I think we got to start judging players a little differently. I mean, I saw a tweet out there that they made a good point. Like, look at the NBA. Bill Russell won 11. No one else won 11 cents. Michael Jordan won 6. No one else won 6 cents. Then you had, Magic and Kobe get 5. No one's won 5. You had Stephen Curry get 4. No one's got 4 cents. I think as time goes on, those numbers of whoever the best player of their generation is, those number of championships that they have are probably going to become less and less, to the point where the best player of their generation probably only ends up with 2 rings, and we're going to look at 2 rings as the best thing a player could probably accomplish.
I think the issue, and this is like a very sports talk radio topic, what I'm about to say, is all we do is look at the rings and not the accomplishments of players and what they've done over thetheir career. Well, how many rings did you win? Oh, you didn't win any, so your career stinks. I mean, that's what they make the Hall of Fame for, right? Like, some people get in on their accomplishments alone. I mean, someone could have 2,000, 3,000 hits in Major League Baseball. That's what they call one of the air marks for getting into the Hall of Fame. So one is 500 home runs. Another one is 3,000 hits. Or for a pitcher, it's 300 wins. I mean, there's plenty of guys who haven't won a title and had a pretty significant individual career in baseball or in basketball. I mean, sometimes it's just that you weren't on the right team for your career and you just didn't win. I mean, go ask Allen Iverson. You never won a title.
We got to, analyze. Every situation is different. Just because one player didn't win and another one did, there's different circumstances. Just like in football, like I think Josh Allen is just as good as Patrick Mahomes, but one guy plays with Andy Reid and the Chiefs, and one guy doesn't.
Almost like a difference of resources, like in a sense, makes a difference too. I mean, because you really could compare the two if you really wanted to on skill level. And are they different games? Yes, but they both can be at number 1 A levels together. Like, that's kind of like the LeBron MJ argument in a sense. Like, we're comparing the two, and I'm like, it's different eras. You can't compare the two. They were both the greatest players of their generation. And I think we try too hard to say, well, LeBron has the most points all time. Well, if you put LeBron in the Jordan era, would he have scored as many points? I don't think so. I think because, again, in the LeBron era, he gets way more fouls called than Michael Jordan ever got called for fouls. So the whole generational thing is dumb and insane. But you're right. We got to look more at the individual more than the teams they were on.
And speaking of LeBron and the Lakers, How do you feel about DeAndre Ayton going to the Lakers and them finally getting a big man?
I think they had no choice. They needed a big man. Is it my favorite move? No. Um, he's the diva of the league. He did not fit in with Phoenix, did not fit in with Portland. I forgot. Was he the one that couldn't get out of his own development to get to a game, or he was stuck on his driveway or whatever and made an excuse that he couldn't get to a game? I mean, this guy is a headache. I mean, they had every opportunity to go get Brook Lopez, and somehow he ended up with the Clippers. They let Dorian Finney-Smith go, which is probably going to kill them this season because he's a really good player. I know he was with the Nets organization. I know. So I don't know what the Lakers and Rob Pelinka are doing there in LA, but they needed a big man. That's really all this move is. Could he be a really good player if his head was on straight and he was focusing on the game of basketball? Absolutely. And I'll be the first one to say that if he's focused, he could probably be one of the better big men in the sport, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, I agree. And it definitely seems like there was a lot of big men that the Lakers could have went out and get. I think the reason why they decided to go with DeAndre and because he was bought out, he is still getting paid his money from Portland. So I think they were able to get him at a cheap discount. And with the Lakers not having a lot of money, that's probably why they went out and got DeAndre. But this is going to be a team that doesn't seem like they're going to have a lot of depth. They don't have a backup big man at all. So if DeAndre is any sort of headache or is any sort of injury, that's going to really hurt this team, man. It seems like it may just be just like last year where they're a good team that flashes a lot with LeBron and Luka, but ultimately they probably flame out in the first or second round of the playoffs when they get to a team that's much deeper. And speaking of your team, Nick, the Nets were made one of the biggest moves. They were able to get Porter Jr. For Cam Johnson. So now Cam Johnson is going to be going to the Nuggets. He gives them good three-point shooting. He's also more reliable, and he's a two-way player that can help them defensively. So I like what the Nuggets have done. They surround Jokic also with Bruce Brown with three-point shooters. I'm not sure what the Nets get out of it, but I definitely think it helps out the Nuggets.
First-round pick in 2032 was also part of that. So I think it was more a move knowing that they were not going to be able to hold on to Cam Johnson at some point. So you might as well get what you can get for him because he was a hot commodity apparently around the league. Michael Porter Jr. could be a good player. I think just the environment was not a good spot for him. He was a little bit of a wild shooter in Denver, had some injuries that did not help him along the way. So maybe a change of scenery would be a good thing. I happen to like him as a player. I also think when you're in the same place as a Jamal Murray and a Jokic and Aaron Gordon, you're a fourth, fifth fiddle in Denver. Now, players will tell you, I'm a team player. I'm all in. That's baloney. I mean, these players, as much as they want to win a title as a team, they want a bigger role in the organization that they're part of. Now, will he be up a little bit further on the net roster? Yes, but they're still a rebuilding roster. They have a long way to go. Does it add more to the roster? Yes, because he can shoot. He's got some range. He could play some defense. They get a 2032 first-round pick, so that's another asset that they have. They did some draft work. I think they had 2 first-rounders, I think, in the NBA draft this year. I didn't recognize the 2 names that they pulled, but I'm hoping that drafting 2 people in the top 25 is going to pay off for them. I'm hoping. But I don't know. I don't know. My expectations are low for the Nets right now.
It kind of reminds me of, not saying they play this similar at all. They're completely different players, but it reminds me of the Warriors when they had Jordan Poole, where they were a championship team, and he was like the 4th best player on the championship team. But now he goes to the Wizards, and now, yeah, the Wizards are one of the worst teams in the league. But now he's their like go-to scorer, one of their 2 or 3 faces of the team. I think that's kind of like how Porter Jr. would be. Well, now he'll get more minutes. We'll get to see what he could do as the main guy. I mean, the Nets just did this a couple of years ago with Mikal Bridges, where he was like the 3rd or 4th guy on the Suns. One on the Nets was their best player. Didn't really win much, But then now he's off to the Knicks, and now he's really, really good as that third or fourth option. So we see this a lot. But like you said, the Nets are in a complete rebuild. They're a couple years away from competing, but I guess one good thing is at least they're in the East where it makes it a little bit easier to get better. And one last move I'll say that just happened recently is the Miami Heat getting Norman Powell. I think they absolutely stole him, and I think that's something they needed. Getting a third guy to go with Tyler Hero on Bam Adebayo. Norman Powell played like a borderline all-star. I mean, guys like Shaq and them were saying he should have made it last year. So I think that makes Miami definitely a playoff team. Maybe they could even compete for a top 4 position in the East, at least a top 6. And then the Clippers in that deal was able to get John Collins, who's a really good rebounder as well. So that was a move that definitely surprised me, the fact that Miami was able to get Powell for so cheap.
Yeah, this was a weird deal. And then it was funny because people were talking about Kevin Love being a useless contract again in this deal heading to Utah, who was obviously going to get bought out by Utah. I don't know what Miami is doing, to be quite honest. Like, obviously you have your two guys in Hero and Bam. Norman Powell does make them better. That's not even a question. But that's not a third piece to win a title in Miami. No disrespect to Norman Powell. He played really well in LA with the Clippers. But you need more than those 3 guys if you're going to win a title.
It probably gets them out of that playing tournament, though, because Miami's always been constantly in that 8th to 10th seed. I think this definitely puts them in a position where maybe they're not a championship team, but they should be at least in the top 6 of the East next year.
I could definitely see them going from like an 8-9 to a 6 and really being, because when you have a solid 3 players, you should be in the top 6. Usually that's where you end up. Because once you fall out of the top 6, then you have a whole different scenario going on between the play-in, and all that stuff, and it makes it a lot harder because you have to play 3 games sometimes at that point before you even get to the actual playoff. But this one made me scratch my head, and there's been a few deals already that have made me scratch my head so far this offseason. Last thing I want to mention from the NBA is coaching news with the Knicks. Mike Brown, are you freaking kidding me? You fired Tom Thibodeau, who brought your team to the conference finals for the first time since 2000. You owe the guy $30 million. You say, sayonara, there's the door. And you bring in a guy who got ran out of town in Cleveland and Mike Brown for LeBron. Are you kidding me?
Now, I know he's got championship pedigree because I'm pretty sure he was one of the assistant coaches for the Golden State Warriors. So that's probably what they're thinking. But, man, to get rid of a guy in Tom Thibodeau who, yes, he has his flaws. Yes, he doesn't like to have a large rotation, and he kind of runs the guys into the ground. And some of the guys do get injured, and, some of the guys do get fatigued as the season wears on. But Tom Thibodeau, who gave the Knicks their most successful season in 25 years, I think they made a mistake. And, I do like Mike Brown. I definitely think he's a top 30 head coach in the world and should get a head coaching job. But I do think that the Knicks did downgrade that coach.
I mean, they didn't make any upgrades to the roster either, knowing that they have some issues with the big man situation and everything that's going on there. But with what we said, Halliburton and Tatum and those guys being out, they really have no excuse to finish below a 3 seed, really, in the Eastern Conference next year. If they fall below a 3 seed, that's a disappointing season. Now, Nick D and I have had this argument many times about seeding doesn't matter. It's true. For the most part, seeding doesn't matter unless you're the 1 through 3 seed. Then the seeds, I feel like, in my opinion, matter because you have more home court the deeper you go into the series. But the Mike Brown move makes me scratch my head. Empty the Bench is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience, from playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And now back to the show. This guy rears his ugly head again. Stephen A. claps back at critics. This is a par for the course story if you really want my 2 cents of it. I think this goes back more to the whole solitaire thing at the NBA Finals. It also has to do with the NBA draft because he was yelling about the Knicks and everybody else. I was saying to you before show, I think ESPN, just because they're paying him $20 million a year, they're literally just going to throw him in every piece of content that ESPN has so they can say, oh, Stephen A said this.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we're getting to the point where instead of seeing, guys who are just strictly NBA draft experts, it's just more about the star and the person who's talking about it. And I like the fact that when they just have kind of like the NFL, where people don't like it, but you have Mel Kiper, who strictly does the draft. He follows it all year round. Stephen A. Smith, he does follow a lot of different things, so he's not completely in tune with college basketball and these NBA prospects throughout the entire year. So there's prospects out there where he really doesn't know a lot about. And then he's also critiquing the teams and what they're doing. And it definitely seems like when you watched him talk, I think it was with Bob Myers, you could definitely see, how much Bob Myers knew compared to how much Stephen A. Smith knew. And I think we got to get back to having guys who are just strictly NBA draft guys. But like Stephen A. Smith said, it's all about the ratings. It's all about the money. And the fact that Stephen A. Smith was on the show gets them more ratings than if they had some guy who's an NBA draft expert like Jonathan Gavoni that a lot of people probably don't know about.
What scares me is that they're talking about putting Stephen A. in the booth for a few games for the NFL.
I hope not.
And I was, well, no, because I told you they have to get their money's worth out of that $100 million over 5 years they're going to spend. And people, even for the worst, ESPN's going to love the attention, even if it's negative. Oh, get Stephen A. out of the booth. Get Stephen A. out of the booth. That's what everyone's going to say. So they don't care what the attention is if he goes into the Monday Night Football booth. As much as I used to hate Buck and Aikman all the time on Fox, I'd rather take Buck and Aikman over having Stephen A. bugging the booth half the time and letting them concentrate on calling the game of football so I can actually understand what's going on the field and not have Stephen A. going, it's blasphemous a million times. Like, I don't care. It's like, it's too much already.
Yeah, and it's funny because, Bob Myers was sitting there telling, Stephen A. Smith during the draft, like, these things ain't easy. You can draft a player, and no matter, whether you get it right or wrong, you never truly know. You can know the most in the world, and you can still get these players wrong. It's not an exact science. Like he said, if he knew as good as, Jokic was or Draymond Green, even though he drafted him, he would have drafted him much earlier, so you never know. And then Stephen A. Smith screaming, well, figure it out. I know it's hard, but figure it out. Well, if it was that easy, then why don't you tell them how to figure it out? It's obviously not that easy, and there's a reason why these 32 GMs have so much pressure on them. But I understand, they got to get their ratings, and then he brought up the solitaire thing, and he was like, hey, I work whatever it was, 300 of the 365 days a year. I'm on solitaire right now, and then even while he's going on this rant, he pulls up solitaire on his phone and says, I'm on it right now. This is what I do all the time. So, I mean, he says, he doesn't care. He's a grown man. He can do what he wants to do. People shouldn't be worried about what he does. So now I'm sitting there thinking all the times where I've been watching First Take and he's on his phone or his iPad, I'm thinking he's looking at notes or news. He must have been playing solitaire this whole time.
I mean, you and I can laugh about that, but I think it might be true. Like, actually, like, he doesn't care. I don't know if you saw the clip one time where Molly Kiram, who's the actual host of First Take, he was trying to point out to Stephen A. like that his laptop and his phone were being seen on the monitor or whatever, and he got pissed off that she pointed it out. I mean, I wouldn't want my information out there that's on my laptop or on my phone on national TV. I mean, that's such a ludicrous argument to say, well, I'm a grown man. I can do whatever I want. Well, if you're such a grown man, like you make $20 million a year, I think you said this a while ago, but I agreed with it, that you make millions of dollars. You get to wear those expensive suits. You get to watch sports for a living. And this is how you're going to treat people when they say you shouldn't be doing certain things. Your way is to be combative and to fight back and say, you don't tell me what to do. I'm a grown man. Damn it. I know. Like that. It's bad that I can even do all that. But my point is, like, that's what he sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean, we don't obviously, we're trying to get into the same profession as Stephen A. And we would love the opportunity to have a job like that. And even for doing ETV Sports, you don't see any of us on the phone. We have our complete focus because I think that's what the audience deserves. If people are tuning in to watch you, I think that they deserve your undivided attention because that's not a guarantee. It's a privilege to have an audience and to have people watch you. Not everybody gets that audience. And for you to be one of the people who has millions of people watching you, you're kind of taking advantage and not showing how appreciative you are of that privilege. And I think that's a slap in the face. There's so many millions of people like us and others who are trying to get into this field and want to do what you're doing. And that's just a slap in the face to everybody. Like, hey, I'm getting my $20 or so million. If I want to be on solitaire, I can be. It's not the point. It's the fact that you're not giving your undivided attention to an audience that pays money to watch your stuff, and they're not getting it. And they definitely deserve it.
And I think you made a good point there that because his name has garnered a lot of attention and he has a lot of followers and First Take has a lot of followers, he doesn't have to care as much because he's got the leverage. Why do you think his negotiations were so public? And why do you think the negotiations took so long? Because he probably said, I don't need you guys. I can literally go do what I want, even though that's such an egotistical attitude. But I guess in some instances he's right because he's got enough following and his name is worth enough that he could have gone off on his own and did what he wants. But I don't want to hear about, oh, well, I'm going to go do a political show or I'm going to go off and do, oh God, I can't remember the name of the soap opera show that, General Hospital. Like, I don't want to hear about that. Like, when you're on ESPN, I want to hear sports. Now, people are going to yell at me and say, well, you stop telling him to stick to sports. Are you on ESPN or not? I mean, if I'm turning on ESPN, I want to see sports. I don't care about what you did on General Hospital. I don't care what politics you are. I don't care what other crap you're doing on the side. Give me sports. That's all I care about.
No, I 100% agree. And I feel like while Stephen A, as the years have gone on, I think he's starting to let his ego get too big. And I think that's why we see him coming at players harder than he's ever come before. I mean,
John
look what
Morant.
happened with LeBron and then the Tyrese Halliburton story of saying, oh, players far more accomplished. I tried to come at me before, and look how that went. And it's just like, I feel like when you watch Stephen A, it almost seems like he's annoyed. Like he doesn't even want to be a part of the shows anymore. And then when we get closer to summer, all he's talking about is, well, I can't wait to go on my much-needed vacation. Like, dude, you're getting paid $20 million to go to the NBA Finals for free and watch it and talk about it. I mean, yeah, everybody deserves a break and everybody deserves a time off. But I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are working 10 times harder jobs who don't even get a vacation and they don't complain nearly as much as you. I mean, if I had a job like that, I wouldn't even be thinking about vacations.
Right. I mean, and this is going to sound extreme, but there are people who like are garbage man or dig ditches or I would even throw doctors in there who work 10 or 20 times as hard. Like, heck, during COVID, doctors were the hardest working people in the world, for crying out loud. Do you think they ever took a day off during COVID? No. I mean, there are people who would chop an arm off to sit and watch NBA and get paid for a living. So that's why this whole thing is a slap in the face to people like us who want to get in the media business and want to grow and grow a podcast, grow a network like we're doing. And it's so dumb. It's dumb. Like, that's why, like, I used to watch First Take a lot. Now I don't even. The last time I watched First Take, I would say it had to be over a year ago, probably, at least. And people are going to say, that's not true. No, I really have not watched First Take in over a year. The only time I see anything from First Take is when they obliterate it a million times on Twitter because ESPN has to put Stephen A clips out all over the place. So that's the only time I see a Stephen A clip. But First Take is an abomination to television because it's no longer about facts and journalism and trying to build a legitimate discussion. It's about who can yell the loudest, who's the more entertaining person, who has the most followers so that when they go on First Take, because Stephen A is the executive producer, so he decides everything on there now. Like, It used to be JJ Redick before he took the Laker job. It's Kendrick Perkins who will yell about the most ridiculous thing, but it gets viral because ESPN puts it everywhere. Who else?
Dan Orlovsky for football.
Ryan Clark. I mean, and you and we talked about a Ryan Clark story months ago, if I remember correctly, where he just totally made a horrible. Who was it? Who was that story about again?
Oh, it was when he was talking about. Well, first he mentioned about Shedeur Sanders dropping the draft due to his skin color, and then he mentioned about the unfairness about when he was grading Lamar Jackson compared to Josh Allen.
And that's what I'm talking about. Stephen A. would rather talk about that than let's talk about sports. Because that, in my opinion, that has nothing to do with sports at all. That's what you call off the field.
And honestly, I agree with Marcellus Wiley. Like, I really liked it when he had Max Kellerman out there. Like, Max Kellerman was a guy that really was able to stand up to Stephen A. And, yeah, he made some crazy, projections, like Tom Brady falling off a cliff that he was wrong about. But I think Max Kellerman was really insightful. He was really a smart guy. And I think he was someone that had really good debates with Stephen A. And now we see Marcellus Wiley saying that it was Stephen A.'s decision of why Max Kellerman was no longer on the show. And I don't like that. I think that they were a good comparison, but I guess when anybody threatens Stephen A. Smith's intelligence or ego, you can no longer be on the show. And that's why it's became pretty much, it's not even First Take. It's just Stephen A. Smith show with different guests that come on all the time. I know during football season we see Shannon Sharp as well, but it wasn't the same when he had the clear-cut permanent host like he did with Skip Baylor, sort of like he did with Max Kellerman. So I think that's unfortunate. I love Max being on the show.
Yeah, I mean, you said it exactly right, and then I'll just frame it that basically Stephen A. did not like that Max was essentially smarter than him on the show. And that's why, because Stephen A. has the right to hire, the right to fire to that show, being the executive producer. I think he has too much power. If you want my full frank opinion of it, is when you can control everything, you literally are drunk with power. And that's what this whole situation is. So, I don't know. It's never going to change. Let's just put it that way. Speaking of anger and situations, let's talk about Angel Reese blasting the refs. I don't know where to start, to be quite honest. I know she was mad at the officials for not making calls, and the WNBA has taken on a much different light now that they have more names in the spotlight. But what do you make of her blasting the referee?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised because I know she was always the one, her and others who were, intentionally following Caitlin Clark, and there was a lot of times where they weren't calling it fairly like they should. But I guess when I read more into it, I guess she was saying, she's a player that likes to go to the rim a lot and go to the basket and crash the basket and get rebounds. And she was telling the referees, like, hey, why are they going to the free throw line so much? And we've only been there a few times. So she was just saying that there's inconsistencies game in and game out where one team will get a bunch of fouls and the other one's not, and it's not called the same way. And I guess Kelsey Plum was on Angel Reese's side agreeing with her. So I guess it just seems like an override issue that a lot of players agree with that. The WNBA referees aren't calling things fairly. I guess when you look deeper into it, there may be some truth to it.
I get that, but is this the whole I'm going to bitch at the referees because I don't like that I'm not getting the calls? I mean, you could say this about LeBron, who complains constantly in the NBA side that he doesn't get fouls. Now, should he get more foul calls because he gets grabbed constantly? Yes. But how many times do we see LeBron going over to an official? And I can't remember. There was one moment, I don't remember if it was this past playoffs or a couple, where he was like almost like on the ground, like banging the floor like a kid when he didn't get a call. Do you remember that? Or no?
I think I do a little bit, yeah.
Where he's literally like just banging on the floor and he's like whining and like a baby. And I mean, like, I think some of these star athletes, whether it's the WNBA or the WNBA, sometimes calls are missed. Referees are human. I mean, could there be a bias issue depending on who you're dealing with? Yeah. Caitlin Clark probably gets more calls than anybody in this league, but they're going to treat the greatest player probably right now in the WNBA better than some of the other players because it's better for business and better for ratings if she's the one putting up all the points and the rebounds and the assists and getting the triple doubles and getting her team further and further because it makes them more money. Is it right? No, but that's just what happens in sports. The best players always are going to get the calls.
Well, maybe that's why Angel Reese is upset because, I mean, in her mind, she's on the same level playing field in terms of stardom and player as a Caitlin Clark. So maybe she's thinking, hey, I'm one of these stars. I'm one of the faces of the league. I should be one of these people that are getting the calls.
What I don't like, though, is that she basically went off in the media and she tweeted it a bunch. And you know this already, not just the WNBA, but any sport. What happens as an athlete when you put stuff out on social media?
Well, now you're going to get targeted, and now everyone's going to know it. And now when she's playing these games, all these referees are going to know exactly what she said. And she said a lot of curse words in her description of it, saying she doesn't give a crap, saying the S word and stuff, and saying that she doesn't care about the fine and whatever else. She's sick of it, and something has to be done. But like you said, now she's going to be targeted. Everybody's going to know about how she feels. So now she's probably going to either get less calls or get more calls. But I think it's probably going to lead to referees not liking her as much and probably now not giving her as many calls because of the fact that she called them out the way she did. Like you said, referees aren't perfect.
Right. First of all, or is there some bias? I mean, heck, we can go all the way back to the Tim Donaghy scandal in the NBA where you had gambling involved, and that's a bias situation. You want a true bias situation where there was a problem with gambling? You could go all the way back to the Tim Donaghy scandal where they were controlling the games. But in this scenario, there's really no gambling involved, or none, I should say. Let me be very clear about that. But the tweet they're talking about is someone wrote, a no-name account quoted her and said, "I don't care if I get fined because that shit cheap." That was probably her quote. Probably she said after the game. And then she wrote IDGAF, which we all know what that means. Do better. And she tagged the WNBA on Twitter. Like, you don't think the WNBA is going to see that? You don't think that the Chicago Sky and other media partners are going to see that? I mean, don't get me wrong. She has the right to, like all of us do. We all are entitled to our own opinion when it comes to certain things. But you're a bigger name. Everyone is going to see what you're putting out on social media.
And there's better ways of handling it.
There's better ways of handling it. You want to go talk to the WNBA? You want to go talk to the officiating crews on your own time? You want to talk to the WNBPA and talk to your reps on you think you're being singled out? Fine. Do that behind the scenes. Don't do it in a game. Don't do it on social media. And by the way, if she's being quoted as saying, "I don't care because the fine is cheap," that means that the fine and the punishment are not enough to stop big name players from doing this stuff.
Yeah, and the thing is, the WNBA players don't get paid an awful lot of high salaries, so you can't really give them too high of a fine because they get fined like NFL players where they would have no salary left. So maybe that's why. Maybe the fines are so low in the WNBA that they feel entitled that they can get away with something like this because, like you said, the fine's not big enough to scare people away from doing something like this.
So I just looked it up. So the WNBA issues fines to players and teams for various infractions, including technical fouls, flagrant fouls, unsportsmanlike conduct, which could be that tweet, violations of media policies. Actually, that tweet would probably be that. Fines for technical fouls. Now listen to this. Fines for technical fouls increase with the number of occurrences, with the first 3 costing $200 each. Seriously?
Well, when you're only getting a $50,000 salary.
But still, think about it. What are we talking about? Like under 1% on a $50,000 or $75,000 salary, maybe? Like, and you're paying $200 for a technical foul? Why do you think that they don't care if they get fined?
And when her endorsement deals, a couple $100 for her with the endorsement deals that she's making outside the WNBA, that's chump change to her.
And that's my point. Fines and punishments are not enough in professional sports, period, to stop some of these athletes from doing or having some of the attitudes that they have. So that's why she gets away with this. This is why Kathy Engelbert is a terrible commissioner in the WNBA, because she does not control her league the right way. And the punishments are not enough incentive to stop. So I think this is just a huge mess, and it's just going to be a huge hamster wheel in a circle, and it's just going to keep going. All right, a few more stories left. MLB announces the 2025 All-Star rosters. So I looked at the rosters. Pretty much all the right starters were named, except for probably a certain New York outfielder that didn't get named on the National League side. Now, for the first 3 or 4 weeks, Juan Soto slumped for a while. Now, as they say, 3 or 4 weeks in any sport could be the difference between you getting to the end and competing for your team. He didn't even make the alternate, which is what shocked me.
Ridiculous.
So, and I'm just checking again to be sure, but yeah, he didn't make the reserves at all. Like, if I look at the National League roster for outfielders, Corbin Carroll, Kyle Stowers, which is Miami, Fernando Tatis Jr., that one I get. James Wood from the Nationals, who's an up-and-coming star, is going to be in the home run derby this year. They could have put him on this roster somewhere, even if it wasn't a starter. Because I'm looking at the outfield starters for the National League. P. Crow Armstrong for the Cubs. Okay. Ronald Acuna Jr., who was injured for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, is being named a starter over Juan Soto.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I mean, when I first saw that they were announced, I was looking. I know I'm not the baseball guy you are, but I know who Juan Soto is. And when I was reading, I'm like, wait, I don't see his name on here. I thought it had to be a mistake, so I had to Google search Juan Soto 2025 MLB roster, and they're like, no, he's one of the the snubs that weren't in it, and it really doesn't make much sense. He's a guy who he had a slow start, but I'm pretty sure he got player of the month 1 week. So I mean that should be enough alone to at least get consideration as an alternate. And I mean when you look at this, more than half of the top highest paid players in the MLB aren't in the All-Star game this year. I think it was 6 or 7 of the top 10 highest paid players aren't in it. And I guess, maybe that has to do with the fan voting and the market side, but Juan Soto is in a good market. He's in the New York market. So, but maybe the fan voting had something to do with this. Maybe a lot of fans, he rubbed them the wrong way. But Juan Soto, at the very least, should be an alternate in the All-Star.
Well, I'll give you another reason, and I think it's dumb, is MLB instituted a rule a while back, quite a few years, actually, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, that every team needs to be represented at the All-Star game. I don't know if that's how it works for the NBA, the NFL, and the NHL. I don't know if that's all the same.
I think the NHL is the one other franchise that or the other sport that does that, but I don't like that rule at all. I mean, if your team doesn't have an all-star caliber player, why should a player go there just because he's the best player on his team when you have another team who can have multiple players? It should just be, if you're good enough to be an all-star, it's supposed to be the best of the best. Now, I know they want to get all the fans involved because if you have a player from every team, it incentivizes all the fan bases to watch it. But I disagree with that rule, and I'm glad that the NBA and the NFL doesn't do that.
So, when I look at some of these guys, Kyle Stowers, who I've never heard of, from Miami, you're telling me that he deserves a roster spot here over Juan Soto? James Wood, I guess the only reason technically he's on the roster is he actually has had a decent year so far on the call-up, and he's in the Derby, so I guess that one you can justify because he's already part of the All-Star weekend in the festivities. But Kyle Stowers, are we even going to remember who Kyle Stowers is after he's on the All-Star roster? I mean, no. And the funny part is, so Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso both made the roster. So Lindor was a starter. Alonso is a reserve. You're telling me that Alonso as a reserve is better than Juan Soto as a reserve, his own teammate? I mean, I don't know. It tells me that Major League Baseball, again, fully doesn't know how to market its sport properly. We had the issues that they didn't know how to market Shohei when he came into the league. They did a terrible job of marketing Mike Trout when he was up in his prime. So this is a Major League Baseball issue when it comes to how they market, who they want in the game, And if they really wanted Juan Soto on the roster, they could have put Juan Soto on the roster. Now, there is all these weird rules also with the All-Star game in Major League Baseball, like pitchers and all this stuff. Like if you pitched like 2 or 3 days before the All-Star game, you technically can't pitch in the All-Star game, even though I'm not a fan of that rule, to be quite honest. Like it used to be, hey, we finish. Oh, you have the time off. Go play in the All-Star game. So that's why you're seeing like an extra 7, 8 guys get named as an all-star, even though my opinion of the matter is if you get named after the fact to replace somebody, you can play in the game, but I don't think you should be labeled an all-star if that's the case.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's one thing I hate about the NFL Pro Bowl, where you'll have 5 or 6 quarterbacks that decline, and now like the 12th best quarterback in the AFC out of 16 teams gets to be in a Pro Bowl, gets considered to be a Pro Bowl. I mean, as much as I like Drake May, he's not a Pro Bowl level quarterback, but because he is, he's always going to have it on his resume that I was a Pro Bowler. And I think that we didn't distinguish that and have them be able to play in the game, but maybe not be considered as a Pro Bowler or an All-Star in this case.
You're also missing something else, which this is a problem in all sports, not just baseball. Say you have an incentive in your contract, and I think you know exactly where I'm going with this. So say you were the replacement after the fact. Does your incentive kick in because you technically made the All-Star roster?
Yeah, it shouldn't. I think that's something I definitely disagree with. I think one sport that affects the most is the NBA, because all these contracts, they're really not negotiated on. I mean, the max contract and the super max contracts are pretty much already established, and they're established based on how long you've been in the league and whether you were All NBA, All-Star, or an MVP. And I think we got to take that out. Yeah, you could put the MVP in there and the All NBA, because those are not depend on injuries. The All-Star game is dependent on injuries. So I don't like that. You got players who deserve to make these All-Star games that don't, and because they didn't make it, they get less on their contracts. I think we need to take that off all sports contracts.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like the 7th alternate, you shouldn't be called an All-Star. Sorry, I don't care if you were named to the All-Star game in the last minute, but you don't deserve all the accolades. Like I said, you can play in the game. You can have the moment because you're going to be on TV in the All-Star. Now, I think they actually changed the rule again back to, like, over the years, they were all wearing, like, the AL and the NL. I think they're going back to, like, team representation again for all the jerseys. So that's even worse because now you're going and representing and, like, you're not even supposed to be there as a player. But I don't know. I think Juan Soto should have made the roster. And that's me as a Yankee fan. Everyone's saying, oh, well, everyone hates Juan Soto. First of all, I don't hate Juan Soto. I just don't like the fact that he's a money grubber, and that's all he cared about. But he should definitely be on this roster, and he should have been considered actually for a starter, to be really honest, in this scenario. All right, one last story, which you and I can relate to. I talked about this a little bit on Moving the Goalposts with Nick D. Colin Cowherd named to the Radio Hall of Fame. This is a big deal. A lot of us on this network, big fans. That's how we kind of got into the business. This should have happened a long time ago, in my opinion, at least 5 to 7 years ago, because it's not like sports where you have to be retired and you have to wait the 5 years like in the NFL or the NBA. And I think even Major League. Actually, wait a minute. Which ones do you have to wait for? Do you have to wait for the NFL or no?
Yeah, you got to be retired for 5 seasons.
Okay. I think Major League Baseball is the same way. I don't know about the NBA.
Yeah, I think the NBA might have a waiting period as well. I think all the 4 major sports have one.
So for broadcasting, you don't have to wait. You can literally go in while you're still, but it's deserved. This guy, outside the box, creative, figured out how to entertain while not falsifying information, a la Stephen A. Smith. This is how I got in the business, listening to Colin growing up. I mean, it really started with Mike and Mike. That's how I got into listening to broadcast on radio and TV. And then it was Colin, just because he's different, outside the box, didn't care what people thought, and just giving his thoughts and point of views in a creative way.
Yeah, I'm right with you, Nick. I mean, I remember growing up, first starting to watch, sports medias. And, if you remember on ESPN, you had Mike and Mike in the morning at 6 o'clock. I think it went from like 6 to 10. And then right after that, you had The Herd with Colin Cowherd on ESPN. And that's what I grew up with. And obviously, Colin Cowherd being on the radio, being by himself, having his crazy opinions, and just the way he delivered opinions. Those are what resonated with me. I used to love when fans would call in with them, and he'd pretty much debate the fans themselves. I thought that was really, really cool. And then he would always have famous coaches or players coming and talking with him. And I just love his analysis because he really looked at sports and at stuff a lot differently than everybody else was. He wasn't a typical same old, same old. He really had a unique way of looking at things. And that pretty much shaped the way I looked at things. And then when he moved over to Fox, I even liked what he did at Fox probably even better. It seemed like he got more privilege to do more and say more. He got more creative control with Fox. And now I heard he's moving from Los Angeles to Chicago to continue the Herd. So, I hope the Herd goes on forever. I know at some point it's got to come to an end. But I love Colin Cowherd. To me, he's the greatest to ever do it in terms of sports radio talk. I know you got, Mike, the Mad Dog. You got Mike Francesca, who are some of the pioneers as well. But I think Colin Cowherd, for me, is at the top of the list for radio sports media.
I mean, this guy figured out that it's not always hard-hitting sports talk. Like, we all know that gets boring from time to time. You don't want hot take, but you don't want cookie cutter, which is a big problem in sports talk because everyone thinks sports talk or doing a podcast or whatever is yelling at your camera, which it's not. That's really not what it is. Like, if you watch the shows we do, or like when football season comes back and we bring the football forecast back, like when we do that show, we're not sitting there talking X's and O's for an hour and a half, 2 hours. We're there to kind of bring a creative balance of what we like to talk in the game of football. And that's kind of what Colin does. Like, he has the ability to use theory rather than speculation. And that's what I think made him stand out. Has he had some controversies along the way? Every big name in sports media does. He had a great story, and I was talking about this with Nick the other day when he crashed the Big Lead. I don't know if you remember that story when he sent everybody to the Big Lead website. And ironically, that was owned by Jason McIntyre, who is his sidekick now on the Herd. He had some controversial comments about Sean Taylor at the time, if you remember when all that stuff happened. And just a lot of different things. And now he has The Volume, which is his podcast network, which he's worked really hard on. Draymond Green has a podcast on there. Richard Sherman has a podcast on there. And he's got a lot of different names and different people on there. By the way, you want to talk about sports business? Excuse me, sports business and the way it's going. That podcast network is valued at $100 million. I mean, he figured out how to pave his own lane because that's where all the big names are heading. Oh, I don't need a network anymore to do everything I need to do every day. Does it help in his situation that he's making millions from Fox? And then on top of it, he was able to build his own thing? Yeah, because now he can do whatever he wants and no one can tell him what to do anymore. So it's a big deal to enter the Radio Hall of Fame. And I don't know, I can't think of a more deserving person to get the award. I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to that or no?
I guess one last thing I'll say about Colin, I think what makes him so much credible than other people is he's willing to take credit for things that he gets wrong. He's not afraid to get things wrong. Where some people have too big of an ego that they'll never admit that they're wrong. They always have to be right. They're always trying to prove something to somebody. Where Colin Cowherd, it's not like that. Like when he does this segment where Colin was right, where Colin was wrong. You don't see where Stephen A. Smith was right, where Stephen A. Smith was wrong. And I just love that accountability he has that a lot of other people don't do.
His show is probably at the top of its game during the NFL season when he has his Burning Five or whatever he calls it. I forgot what he calls that segment. But and then when he has all the college coaches on, which is great. He has the NFL and everything on. Like, his show is perfect during the NFL season. Like, because he knows everybody in the game. He knows GMs. He knows insiders that most of us would kill to know in that space. But congratulations, big achievement. If you make it into the Radio Hall of Fame, it must have meant you did something correctly over all those years. I think eventually it's going to get to a point where he just does his podcast stuff, because why do radio 5 days a week anymore when you could just do a podcast and make the same amount of money or more? So it's a huge accomplishment. It's a huge accomplishment to get where he got. I have his 2 books. I've read them before. He's got a very interesting story. I think ESPN regrets the move that they let him go, because the few times that he was up for new contract negotiation with Fox, ESPN tried to get him twice to get him to come back. And I think he just realized, he's like, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to go back there. Because everyone, if you remember, everyone's like, oh my God, ESPN, I got to make it to ESPN. That's the career defining achievement. Like a decade ago, everyone wanted to go to ESPN. Now you don't need ESPN anymore necessarily to grow a sports media career or a sports podcasting career or whatever you want to do in the space. Now you can go to YouTube. You can go to social media. You can go on TikTok and do short form videos. So it's no longer about the big 4 letters in sports. But that'll do it for this episode. Episode 280 of Empty the Bench. If you missed anything on the show that we're doing, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ETB Network, as we get closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. So please like and subscribe. Listen wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and every other place you get your audio. And Empty the Bench is presented by Playback. A bunch of streams on there. We have a lot of our new, our Substack stuff has moved over to the Playback platform, playback.tv/ETB Network, to find out more. Okay. Before we go, anything else you want to say before we conclude?
I just want to say I'm glad last week we did have the 4th of July, but there really wasn't much sports going on. Summer League is going to be starting up now, and we got UFC this weekend, so we got more things to look forward to, and at the end of the month, we got football season starting, so yeah, it may be boring right now, but it's about to get real exciting really soon.
Yeah, just wait, because our football podcasts are coming back. Football Forecast is coming back. Forever Power 5 is coming back. There's a lot of content coming from the ETV network, so just be prepared, because there's going to be a lot. So just stay tuned. But that'll do it for episode 280. He's Anthony Balester. I'm Nick Morgasen. We will see you next week for episode 281. Have a good day, everybody.